Primetime, also released as American Raspberry, is a 1977 sketch anthology film, part of a wave of films responding to Saturday Night Live in the post-counterculture sketch comedy era. Primetime was directed by Brad Swirnoff, with appearances by Warren Oates, Joann Cassidy, Kinky Friedman, and Murphy Dunn. Across America, someone has hijacked the airwaves and replaced their regularly scheduled programming with the most tasteless and offensive distortions of their most familiar shows and commercials. The authorities are shocked, panicked, and seemingly powerless. Everyone has a reason to get offended, and everyone watching eventually does, agitated to the point of civilization's breakdown. That storyline has almost nothing to do with the jokes, which is how sketch comedy films often work. In the 1970s, two major comedy institutions emerged in Western culture: Monty Python's Flying Circus and Saturday Night Live, skewering modern times in an absurdist, irreverent style. And Hollywood attempted to duplicate that energy and experience on their big screens. At least, that might be why all these films went with recreating the channel-changing experience. No need to organically fit all the references, puns, and shock jokes together. In fact, the more strongly they clash, the better. So, how are the jokes in this movie? Well, first, they're intended to be offensive. And there's no reference to determine if they're punching up or punching down. They're just swinging wildly at every moving target. And just like the viewers in the movie, we, the movie audience, don't know who's making the jokes or why. We only know the spirit intended, to tick people off. There are no character arcs to generate sympathy, no earnest moments to interrupt the roasting of society. It's a mean-hearted film. Also, these jokes are old. The reason these movies are practically extinct is because of their short shelf life. References to people like Idi Amin and Jimmy Hoffa don't age well. But it's not all jokes about the 70s. They also go for the universal topics like sex, death, family, body functions, boogers, boobies, boners. Some things never change. Before Primetime, director Brad Swirnoff had co-directed the sketch comedy film Tunnel Vision, released in the summer of 1976. Even with appearances by Chevy Chase and John Candy, that movie was getting harsh reviews while Primetime was in production. When Primetime was completed in 1977, Warner Brothers shelved it, declaring it unreleasable. Cannon Films eventually bought the rights and released it in 1980 as American Raspberry, or Funny America in some markets. Primetime would be Swirnoff's last feature film. TV would be a better success for two of Primetime's writers, Roger Schulman and John Baskin, working on such sitcoms as Good Times and The Jeffersons, and later co-creating the 80s mystery series Crazy Like a Fox. The screenplay for Primetime had 4 credited writers, but arguably the best bits were written outside the film. At minute 36, the song Old Ben Lucas is performed by its composer, singer-songwriter Kinky Friedman. And minute 64 starts a skit for the Clampacks Feminine Pontoon, which was actually adapted from an article in National Lampoon magazine. By the way, the actress in that sketch is Joann Cassidy, who would later appear in Blade Runner and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, there's a lot of that guys in this movie. The Charles Whitman Invitational sketch, starting around minute 8, features Warren Oates and Robert Ridgely. You might recognize Oates from The Wild Bunch or Stripes, and you might recognize Ridgely from Boogie Nights or Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Murphy Dunn plays an MC in a recurring bit about a 24-hour sexual deviant telethon. He has a slightly more dignified role in The Blues Brothers. Harry Shearer portrays the hapless hitchhiker in the CB radio sketch. He'd perform and write more acclaimed comedies later, including This Is Spinal Tap and The Simpsons. So, as a comedy, Primetime is past its prime, and maybe not that funny in its day either. But in the cynicism of the 70s, the trends in comedy were for a more transgressive, anarchic style, and somewhere in the barrage of shock and awe might be in a moment of amusement, or two, especially if you liked early South Park. You could also watch Primetime as social commentary. It is satire, attempting to extrapolate the standards of society to ridiculous extremes. There's a postnatal abortion sketch around minute 12, for example, that sounds a lot like Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. And let's consider the overarching story of the movie, about weaponized humor unleashed against an unsuspecting public through pervasive, inescapable media. Everyone watching finds something to outrage them, but no one stops watching. No one knows who started it or why, and before long it doesn't matter. And then consider that this movie was made a generation before Facebook and Twitter were invented. If the filmmakers had been as good at making people laugh as they were about predicting the future, Primetime would have been a classic.